This is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for avid readers and passionate fans of gay romance fiction. Each week, we bring you exclusive author interviews, book recommendations, and explore the latest in gay pop culture.
For today's GRL bonus episode, I'm happy to welcome back TJ Klune to the podcast.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've just unleashed a whole bunch of awesome to people who were downstairs. We got to hear Kirt Graves do Ravensong, a little Ravensong for the first time.
Correct.
A little bit of Heartsong for the first time.
The next book that comes out next September in the Green Creek series.
Which, as you said, is the first time anybody has heard that outside the Klunetic group.
Right. Well, not even the Klunetic group has gotten to hear that yet. This book is actually kept under wraps by my request, so only a couple of people have actually read it in Dream Spinner too. So it's actually very, very hush and secretive. So that was the first time anybody has actually heard anything about Heartsong. So it was a little nerve-wracking because I'm very protective of this book, and not just for the content of it, but because of the characters in it too. So
before we get to the reason for this, why so protective of those characters?
Because I've put them through so much shit. In Wolfsong and in Ravensong and then Lovesong, the short story follow-up, I've heard this family repeatedly over and over again, and it's not going to get any easier. It's going to get worse. It's going to get a little harder. So we'll have to hope that there's a happy ending at the very, very end, which I promise there will be.
There will be. I have every faith.
Yeah.
Now, what we're really here to talk about is the nice thing you're holding in your hand, which is The Bones Beneath My Skin.
Yes.
Coming out October 26th.
Yep, so next Friday.
Next Friday. I've read the book. I've mentioned on the podcast once already that it's awesome. Go pre-order it. And I'll be reviewing it the week of the 29th, but tell people in your non-spoilerly way that you have what this book's about.
This book was me wanting to write. It started out as something completely different. It started out as me wanting to emulate some of my favorite stories that I read as a kid in the 80s. Movies, Goonies, and you have Firestarter, you have It, and Stand By Me, which is one of my absolute favorite movies. I wanted to write about a group of kids that came together to face something extraordinary. And then as I was writing with this idea in the summer of 2016, Stranger Things came out on Netflix, and it was already what I had planned, and they did it better, so I kind of shoved it to the side. And I kept wanting to come back to it, though, because the girl who was going to be the focal point, one of the three main characters of the book, she kept talking, she kept saying, this is what I want the story to be about, and I tend to listen to when I hear these kinds of characters. So I went back to it because I knew I had a good story there. I knew I had the bones of a good story, so I went and studied a decade later. It was supposed to be originally set in the 80s, but then I moved it to the 90s. And if you think about it, if you look back on how the 80s were, we think back on the 80s with this weird nostalgia that I don't know that it necessarily deserves.
Yeah.
But then when you think about the 90s were fucking weird for everybody. The 90s were it was a crazy time. Like, I don't know that people look back on the 90s with any kind of real fondness, because it was just such a strange time for everyone. And so I figured out that that's where I wanted to set the book, because I started researching events that occurred in the 90s, and once I started formulating the story more, getting away from my original idea, started formulating it more, I decided I wanted to write a 90s action movie. So that's what I went and did.
And those action sequences at times made me so freaking tense.
And those were a bitch to write too. I mean, I can write funny, I can write dialogue, I can write rip your heart out angst, but action is hard to write. It is actually, a lot more difficult than I expected it to be. I've written big action set pieces before, but this book is basically, once it gets going, one continual action scene after another, and it doesn't really let up until the very big explosive climax. And it's it's meant to be that way. This book is, I often think of this book when I think about it, I think of it as my weird 90s action movie, queer romance book, but I also think of it as a theme park ride, because it's essentially, you start reading this book and it's just a roller coaster.
You can see it as one of those motion things through the 3D screens kind of thing,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And you talk about the action. You've written action, obviously, and the Varenya books have action, and the Green Creek books have action. This is very different action.
It is because it's. I went to it. I actually studied. It's kind of funny thinking, even though it's not necessarily a 90s action movie itself, because it just came out recently, but the John Wick movies with Keanu Reeves, those are hardcore action movies, and I watched those over and over and over again because I wanted to get the same kind of feel that those movies have. Those movies are very kinetic. Those movies, the plot is very small and minimal, and it goes from basically one action set piece to another. And I kind of wanted to go that direction while still including an overarching plot of redemption, of family, of faith, and believing in the impossible. But the John Wicks those movies were a very big. I took a big look at those in how I wanted to actually write the action scenes, and so a lot of credit can go to that too.
I would have never thought a Keanu Reeves movie, but
Right, I know. Right, no, I mean it has nothing to do with anything like that at all. But just the way that the action moves, it's just, I find it enthralling. It's just absolutely kinetic, and that's what I wanted for this book. I wanted this book to once you finish one scene, right before the next one picks up, I want you to have to like set the book down for a second, take a deep breath, unclench your toes, and then move on to the next. So.
And then, but even with that, it's like, oh, but what's going to happen now?
Yeah, right.
There's those moments too. It's like, oh, don't do that. No.
See, those are my favorite kinds of books, though. See, and you read, books that you just have to read the next page, no matter what time it is. Those are my favorite kind of books to read because it shows that the author has taken care with their words, and that's what I did with this book. I knew right soon after I finished it that I was going to be self-publishing it. So I wanted to make sure that when I first decided to self-publish, that it was going to be a story that could stand on its own. I didn't want to do a launch for a series. So when I decided to use this story as my first self-publish, I knew it was going to be kind of a weird fit because it is different than what people normally see for me. But I think that it still has the bones of a TJ Klune book in it, just amped up to an 11.
But to me, at least, you reinvent yourself often. Green Creek is different than Varenya, is different than Normal Person, is different than Bear Otter and the Kid. So this just kind of connects to that in the same way.
Yeah, it is. And it's basically because I mean, God love the authors that can write in the same subgenre over and over and over and over again. I would just lose my mind. I would be so bored. And it's... I think that would show in my writing too. If I get bored, the reader is going to know I'm bored of the story, and that's not going to do any of us any good. So the reason I jump around so much is because I want to tell as many types of stories as I can, while still having it be a TJ Klune book, whatever that may be to certain people. But I like being able to try different things because stuff like this it allows me to stretch my writing capabilities to try something new. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. And I mean, authors know that when you write a story, you can tell when it's not working and it sucks, but you kind of either have to gut it or set it aside and come back to it. But this story, as soon as I actually sat down to write it, it took me 5 weeks to write 120 some odd thousand words. 5 weeks. And I was writing like 5, 6, 7, 8-hour days, 7 days a week, and it was, by the time I finished with it, I was super proud of the story that I was able to tell.
What was the plotting process like? Because there's a lot of detail here, but then also you as the author, and at least for this book, you have to know a lot of backstory too to make it all work.
Right, and the outline for this book rivaled the outline for, say, the Verania series.
The series.
Over 4 books, because the Bones Beneath My Skin has a lot of moving parts. Many things are happening, and like you said, though, there's these little details that something may not make sense, say, on page 4, but will pay off on page 200. And I had a lot of ideas, some of them good, some of them bad, but my outline for this, for the Bones Beneath My Skin, was, I think, 20,000 words itself. And that was an outline I wrote even before I started actually writing any part of the book. And the outline was very scene specific. And while it had the overarching themes that I would want running through the book, it was still, there are certain specific scenes that I detailed. Because writing a good action scene is like writing a good sex scene. You have to know where certain body parts are. You have to know where certain limbs are. You can't just all of a sudden be doing one thing when you were just doing something like 2 seconds ago. So I had to make sure that everything was immaculately plotted so I could pull it all together, because if it doesn't pull together, then it all just falls apart, and the payoff won't be worth it. It'll just be like, I don't know what the hell happened, and I don't want people to have that. I want them to know, oh my God, this just happened. So,
do you get ideas like Bones, and then you're like, can I write that?
Yes, specifically Bones. I mean, because when I had to move away from the Stranger Things idea, I thought about, moving it to the 90s and that the weird time it was for everybody, and plus you have to, 2018 is not 1995 when the book was set. It's the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. It's a time of we're still dealing with the AIDS crisis as it was, and it is a very different time for me, because I grew up knowing I was queer, coming out queer in the 90s. And it wasn't a good time for me. So having to go back to that time was a little rough at first. But I knew that I wanted to tell this story. And thankfully I found the voice to be able to do it. It's not all just action, not all stuff blowing up. There's some really big themes in the book about, which is something that they'll see in a lot of my books, about found family and doing what you can to protect those who can't protect themselves. And that's important to me, to no matter what I'm writing, to show that a group of people that may not be related by blood can come together and find each other and be together and fuck all the rest. So.
How did you come up with the name for your lead character, the little girl?
Artemis Darth Vader?
Yeah.
That... Everybody most likely who follows me for a long time knows that I will love Star Wars to the end of the earth. I love Star Wars, everything about it, even the horrid prequel trilogy. I can sit down and enjoy it. Wow,
we may have to talk later about how that works.
But Star Wars is just one of my biggest touchstones of my youth, and I knew going into it when I first started writing. When I first started writing, her name was always Artemis because of the deity, and I wanted to. Her last name was something different entirely. And then I started writing. And I was like, oh crap! Wait a minute. What if her name was Darth Vader? For reasons that will be explained, obviously, but it just came out of nowhere that was going to be her name. So.
With the out of nowhere, because we're not telling you what that is, podcast folks. Would it have worked if her name wasn't Darth Vader from the original?
Yeah, but I would have had to. It wouldn't have worked as well.
Okay.
I think that having it be as it is now, I like the story it became versus the story it was initially going to be. I think it's a better story than because I think that had I tried to go the whole emulation of my favorites from the 80s, it would have been too much like cribbing from what was already there. So I wanted to mine something different, try to find new ground, and I think that the story, what it became, is better than the story it ever would have been had I stuck with my original idea, which is something that is surprising because you never really expect that as an author. You think, oh, I have this great idea, and it's going to be the best thing I can write. But looking back on it now in hindsight, I know that the book that Bones became is the best book it was going to be.
I like that.
Thank you.
Boom. Star Wars as a touchstone.
Yeah.
Is there a space fantasy story that lurks in the TJ Klune blue
I have
brain somewhere?
I have an idea for a big space opera that I want to write, but that's going to be
Later.
Years down the road. Yeah, I have
Your little book in the near
full.
future.
Yeah, my plate is full right now, and but yes, I do have a space opera fantasy thing that I want to do someday. That it's going to be, of course, a queer romance. So look for that in 2037. I don't know.
Heard it here, folks.
Yes.
2037. First self-publish
Yes.
with Bones. Would you do it again?
Yes. Oh man. Like I was okay, let me put it this way first. I've had a great team of people backing me up, helping me do this, put this together through my editors, through the beta readers, through everybody that has formatted and worked to put this together for me, because I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. But it has been so enlightening for me to see how it works like this, because typically with the backing of a publisher, they're just, they send me it when I need to work on it, but no, with the self-publishing, you do the art, you have to hire your own artists, you have to hire the editors, you have to hire people putting the format it together, you have to learn how to upload everything, because I had no idea how to do any of that stuff. So when I finished writing a book last year, I took 2 weeks off and spent my days learning everything there was to learn about self-publishing and what I needed to do. And the only downside of it is that I wish I had done it sooner on certain parts. But yeah, I will be definitely doing it again in the future, most likely in 2020, the end of 2020, because I have two big, huge books coming out the first month of 2020, then summer of 2020. And I'll be doing most likely a self-publish in 2020, the fall. So
3 books in 2020.
yeah, because they're going to be the 2 big tour books.
Right.
Yeah, and the adult book comes out in the first few months, and then my big YA book comes out that summer. They're launching it summer 2020, and so to kind of leave my back end a little empty, so I want to make sure that I have something to put there. So, wow, that sounded sexual. Holy crap.
It really did. I wasn't going to say anything.
Homosexual writers. All right. But yeah, so it's going to be something I will definitely do again, because I feel more in control of, granted, don't get me wrong, I want to make sure everybody's clear. Dream Spinner has been awesome. They've been great, and they've probably given me more allowances than they typically do with other authors, because I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to certain things. But I've been just stunned by the process of self-publishing, and I wish I had thought of trying to do something like that sooner.
If nothing else, because there is, as you mentioned, that team, it does let you put it out when you want to put it out.
Yeah,
as opposed to
and
working into somebody else's schedule.
Right, exactly. And this book was written, beginning of, in indie world, you write a book, chances are it's probably going to be out in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And even Dream Spinner now is pushing it back to a year between when they get the book to when they actually publish it. But this book was finished beginning of 2017, and it's coming out at the end of 2018, which is more in line of traditional publishing. I'm learning that now with Macmillan and Tor, that they're planning me through 2023. So it is. It's being able to set my own schedule, my own pricing, my own, all of that kind of stuff has just been eye-opening, and I'm ready to do it again.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Bones is going to audio.
Yes, Bones is going to audio. It's actually done.
Nice.
From what I heard. What Greg Tremblay is doing the audio for it. He's doing a reading on Saturday from it at the audio panel, and that will come out in December. I have 3 audiobooks coming out in the next 3 months. So yeah, we have Wish from Michael Leslie, A Wish Upon the Stars, Ravensong from Kirt, and then Bones Beneath My Skin, on top of the Lovesong podcast that we just announced. So,
and let's talk about that. At the beyond Kirt giving us those 2 readings, Kurt's been a busy boy and been generating a podcast
he
as
did.
well.
We announced Lovesong, the podcast. This is a 6-episode podcast. All the details are up on my website for where you can download it. But it's essentially, I released a short story following Ravensong called Lovesong for Elizabeth. And he came to me wanting to record it. And I said, sure, that sounds fine with me. Then he was like, well, what if we did something more with it? I said, okay. How much work do I have to do? He was like, no, I'll do it. I was like, okay, that's cool. Do all you want. I don't care. But then he got Derek McLean together. He got Michael Leslie, Greg Tremblay, and myself. And he did each separate interviews. So it'll be 6 episodes total. The first 2 are the actual Lovesong story. And then the last 4 episodes are the interviews that he did with us, and that launches today for free. So you can download it if you have a podcast app. You can download it by searching for Lovesong or TJ Klune or Kirt Graves, and or you can find it on my website and download it from there. But yeah, that's another big project that we just announced today for the first time. So
yeah, and we'll have all that in our show notes as well, so people can link up to all that too. We've talked about 2020 a little bit. What's next for you, either towards the end of this year or 2019 for books?
I have buy this, please.
Buy that. It's
Please
really
buy
good.
This. Please buy this. It comes out next Friday, the 26th. And then I'm done for the year. And I'll be taking a 4-month break before I launch the first of 4 books in 2019. I have the sequel to How to Be a Normal Person that comes out February 12th, and that is How to Be a Movie Star. Next summer is the last book in the At First Sight series, and it's called Why We Fight, and it's my bigender, biracial hero, Corey, that people have been wanting for years. And that finally comes out. Next September is Heartsong, the 3rd book in the Green Creek series. And then next December is a book I can't talk about that will come out, and it will be a surprise. And you will learn more about that next year, probably much, much closer to the release date. And I'm not going to even be talking about it as leading up to the release. It's going to be a big surprise for people. So
the big TJ Klune secret project.
It is. It's my big secret project. I've been working on it for the last 2 months, and I'm about done with it. And it'll be launching December, and then that'll be my last big hurrah before I sell out and go to tour.
It's so not a sellout.
I know, it's going to be fun now.
It's the next phase.
Right, the next phase. It's going to be the next step for me, and it's been building to this, and I'm so grateful that people have allowed me to get to this moment.
How do people keep up with everything? What's the website?
TJKluneBooks.com. I'm on Twitter, TJ Klune, Facebook, the Klunatic Facebook group. Everybody should go on that. That's where you get to read and hear stuff first.
Yep.
And on Instagram and all that fun stuff too. But TJKluneBooks.com is the best place to keep up with all that's going on.
All right, TJ, thank you so much
for
hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned for a little bit more, because right after we fade out from here, we're going to have Kurt's reading from both Ravensong and from Lovesong. Or Heartsong, rather.
Heartsong. Yep.
Heartsong. I keep getting those confused. So sorry. So stay tuned for those, and they'll be right after this.
So this is a scene from very, very early in Ravensong. It's between 2 of my favorite characters, which are Gordo and Elizabeth. And it is spoiler-free because this actually takes place in a flashback to what happens in Wolfsong. So this is Gordo and Elizabeth talking right after Joe has announced that he and Gordo and Carter and Kelly are going to be leaving Green Creek. She stood in the kitchen of the Bennett house, staring out the window. Her hands were curled against the counter. Her shoulders were tense, and she wore her grief like a shroud. Even though I hadn't wanted anything to do with wolves for years, I still knew the respect she commanded. She was royalty, whether she wanted to be or not. Gordo, Elizabeth said, without turning around. I wondered if she was listening for wolves singing songs I hadn't been able to hear for a long time. How is he? Angry? That's to be expected. Is it? I suppose, she said quietly. But you and I are older. Maybe not wiser, but older. Everything we've been through, all that we've seen, this is just another thing. Ox is a boy. We've sheltered him as much as we could. You brought this upon him, I said before I could stop myself. The words were flung like a grenade, and they exploded as they landed at her feet. If you'd stayed away, if you hadn't brought him into this, he could still. I'm sorry for what we did to you, she said, and I choked. What your father did, it wasn't fair or right. No child should ever go through what you did. And yet you did nothing to stop it, I said bitterly. You and Thomas and Abel, my mother, none of you. You only cared about what I could be to you, not what it would mean for me. What my father did to me meant nothing to you. And then you went and left. You broke the bonds with the pack. Easiest decision I ever made. I can hear when you lie, Gordo. Your magic can't cover your heartbeat. Not always. Not when it matters most. Fucking werewolves. Then, I was 12 when I was made the witch to the Bennett pack. My mother was dead. My father was gone. But still, Abel held out his hand to me, and the only reason I said yes was because I didn't know any better. Because I didn't want to be left alone. I was scared, and you didn't do it for Abel. I narrowed my eyes at her. What the hell are you talking about? She finally turned and looked at me. She still had the Afghan around her shoulders. At some point, she pulled her blonde hair back into a ponytail, locks of which were loose and hung about her face. Her eyes were blue, then orange, then blue again, flickering dully. Most anyone who looked at her would have thought Elizabeth Bennet weak and frail in that moment. But I knew better. She was backed into a corner, the most dangerous place for a predator to be. It wasn't for Abel. No. So that was the game she wanted to play. It was my duty. My father lost control when his tether was taken from him. My father has aligned himself with, we all had a part to play, Elizabeth said. Every single one of us. We made mistakes. We were young and foolish, and filled with a great and terrible rage at everything that had been taken from us. Abel did what he thought was right back then. So did Thomas. I'm doing what I think is right now. And yet you did nothing to fight your sons, to not let them make the same mistakes we did. You rolled over like a dog in that room. She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she said, and you didn't? Fuck. Why? Why what, Gordo? You have to be more specific. Why are you letting them go? Because we were young and foolish once, filled with a great and terrible rage, and that has now passed to them. She sighed. You've been there before. You've been through this. It happened once, and it's happening again. I'm trusting you to help them avoid the mistakes we made. I'm not Pack. No, she said, and that shouldn't have stung like it did. But that's a choice you made, much like we are here now because of the choices we made. Maybe you're right. Maybe if we hadn't come here, Ox would be human. Her eyes flashed again. Thomas, I snorted. He didn't tell me shit, but it's not hard to see. What is it about him? I don't know, she admitted. I don't know that Thomas knew either. Not exactly. But Ox is special, different. He doesn't see it yet, and it may be a long time before he does. I don't know if it's magic or something more. He's not like us. He's not like you. But he's not human. Not completely. He's more, I think, than all of us.
And it took me forever to find even the smallest excerpt for him to read that was not a spoiler. So, this scene, setting it up just a little bit, is Robbie remembering what it was like with his mother, a character we have never met to date. Have fun. Bye.
Bye. When we'd been on the run, hunters chasing after us with a frightening persistence, my mother did everything she could to keep things as normal as she could for me. Sometimes we could afford a cheap motel. They were always dingy and smelled awful, but she said we needed to be thankful for the little things. Some nights, she stayed with me, curled around me, whispering quietly in my ear. She would tell me about a place where we could be free, where we could shift and feel the earth beneath our feet without worrying someone would hurt us. She told me there was a place, far, far to the west, where wolves and humans lived together in harmony. They loved each other, she whispered, because that's what pack was supposed to do. And she told me other stories, little things that made me ache, about how her grandfather had been sweet and loving. He would always give her fruit candies when no one was watching. About the first time she shifted and saw the world in shades of wolf. About how she had made mistakes, but she couldn't be too angry because those mistakes had brought me to her. She said that in a perfect world, my father would love us. He wouldn't care what we were, that he wouldn't have used her. That when I was born, things would have changed for him. No one can know the minds of men, she said, her voice so bitter that I could taste it. They tell you things and you believe them because you don't know any better. I would reach up and tell her not to cry. Sometimes she even listened to me.
For detailed show notes and links to everything discussed in this episode, go to biggayfictionpodcast.com. New episodes are available every Monday at all major podcast distributors. You can also find us on YouTube. I'm Derek McLean. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.